Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the USS Reliance engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The bridge was a cocoon of soft blue lights and holographic displays, casting flickering shadows on the faces of her crew. Outside the viewport, the void stretched infinite, speckled with the faint glow of distant stars. Ilara's dark eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the readouts. She was the steady one, the captain who turned chaos into order with a calm word and a decisive hand. Beside her, Lieutenant Kai Ren slouched in the navigation console, his fingers dancing over the controls with the casual flair of someone who treated starships like extensions of his own body. Kai was the spark, witty, irreverent, always ready with a quip to cut the tension. Another quiet shift, Cap? At this rate, we'll rust before we see action. Across from him, Engineer Mira Patel hunched over her engineering station, her wiry frame taut as she monitored the warp core's fluctuations. Mira was cautious to a fault, her mind a web of contingencies, always 3 steps ahead of potential disasters. She glanced up, her brow furrowed under the glow of her screen. Quiet is good, Kai. Last time we had action, half the auxiliary systems fried. Remember Vega Prime? Ilara allowed a small smile, though her gaze never left the main display. The Reliant was a mid-sized explorer, one of humanity's workhorses in the fringe sectors, charting the unclaimed edges of the galaxy. 3 years into their tour, the crew had become a tight unit, Ilara's resolve anchoring them, Kai's humor lightening the load, Myra's precision keeping them alive. But lately the logs had filled with anomalies, ghost signals from dead worlds, ships vanishing without a trace. Command dismissed it as sensor glitches, but Ilara felt the undercurrent, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. Status report, Ilara said, her voice even, cutting through the ambient hum. All systems nominal, Mira replied, tapping a sequence that sent diagnostic lights cascading across her panel. Warp coils at 80% efficiency. Fuel reserves holding steady for another 6 months. Kai leaned back, propping his boots on the console's edge, a habit Ilara tolerated but never encouraged. Sensors picking up that nebula ahead. Looks like a beauty. Swirling purples and greens. Romantic even. Ilara rose, stepping to the viewport. The nebula loomed, a vast cloud of ionized gas birthing stars in its heart, its tendrils reaching out like ethereal fingers. It was beautiful, yes, but beauty in space often hid teeth. Helm, plot a course around the outer edge. No unnecessary risks. Aye, Captain. Kai's fingers flew, adjusting the trajectory. The ship banked gently, thrusters firing in precise bursts. As they approached, the nebula's glow bathed the bridge in shifting colors, painting Ilara's face in hues of violet. She watched, a knot forming in her stomach. Humanity had pushed into the stars with eyes wide open, colonies on a dozen worlds, alliances with the tentative xeno-enclaves, but lately, it felt like they were stumbling blind. Reports from the core world spoke of unrest, protests against the expansion, whispers of isolationism. Eyes closed, some called it a retreat from the galaxy's embrace. Myra's console beeped sharply. She straightened, her caution flaring into alarm. Captain, incoming transmission. Fragmented. Not human origin. Ilara turned. On screen. The main display flickered, resolving into static-laced bursts of imagery, angular structures crumbling under a crimson sky, figures, tall, insectoid, scrambling in panic. No words, just raw feeds looping in distress. Then, a single pulse of data, coordinates pinpointing a system deep within the nebula. Kai whistled low. That's no glitch. Looks like a distress call from the Zorith Collective. They went dark months ago. The Zorith, peaceful traders, their hive spanning 3 systems. Allies loosely. Ilara's mind raced. Protocol demanded caution. The nebula's radiation could scramble comms, hide ambushes. But ignoring it? That went against everything she stood for. Options? She asked, eyes on her crew. Mira shook her head. Radiation levels will spike inside. Shields might hold, but it'll strain the core. We could lose propulsion. Kai grinned, though his eyes were serious. Or we dive in, grab what we can, and play heroes. Humanity's good at that. Ilara waited, the weight of command settling like gravity. The galaxy was vast and different. But this felt like a crack in the facade, a call they couldn't unhear. Helm adjust course. We're going in. Mira reinforced the shields. Let's see what woke up in there. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the stellar drift as engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with starlight, but the real storm brewed in the sensor readouts, swarms of unregistered vessels darting through the outer rim, their signatures a chaotic jumble of alien tech no one had catalogued since the human accord went dark. 3 years. That's how long it had been since Earth sealed its borders, citing some internal crisis no one outside the Sol system could pry loose. And in that void the galaxy had unraveled. Status on the relay buoy? Ilara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She was the brave one, always had been, the pilot who threaded needles through asteroid fields while others panicked. Beside her, Lieutenant Kale, the wiry Zenthri engineer with his iridescent scales catching the console glow, tapped furiously at his panel. Buoys offline, Cap, whatever hit the network fried it clean. We're blind on the jump coordinates to Vega Prime. Kale's mandibles clicked in frustration, a sound like cracking ice. He was cautious to a fault, the kind who double-checked seals before a hull breach, but even he couldn't hide the edge in his tone. Ilara nodded, eyes narrowing at the tactical display. A rival scavenger fleet, likely the Kragari out of the Drift Nebula, had been shadowing them since the last relay ping. Not outright hostile yet, but their probes nipped too close, testing defenses. Resource shortage was the name of the game now. With human trade routes collapsed, fuel cells and rare isotopes were worth more than lives. One wrong move, and the drift would be stripped for parts. Options? She said, turning to Mira, the comms officer slouched in her station. Mira was the witty heart of the crew, a human like Ilara, with a scar across her cheek from a bar brawl on Titan and a grin that could defuse a bomb. Or start one. Mira leaned back, fingers drumming. We could limp to the nearest outpost. Rilo station's got a black market for parts. But that's 2 days sublight, and those Kragari shadows? They'll pounce before we clear the debris field. She paused, smirking faintly. Or we improvise. Got an old human trick from the archives. Rig the auxiliary thrusters to emit a false warp signature. Make 'em think we're jumping blind into a sun. Kale's scales rippled in alarm. That's suicide if it backfires. The emissions could overload our core. Ilara waited, the air thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and solder from Kale's earlier repairs. The challenge wasn't just the rivals, it was the isolation. No human fleet to call, no Accord protocols to lean on. Just them, 3 souls against a fracturing galaxy. Do it, she decided. Mira, spool up the emitters. Kale reinforced the baffles. We buy time or we burn. The ship shuddered as Mira initiated the sequence, false energy pulses blooming across the sensors like phantom flares. On the view screen, the Kragari vessels hesitated, their formation fracturing as captains barked confused orders over open channels. Ilara allowed herself a tight smile. Human grit, turn weakness into a feint. But as the drift accelerated into the debris field, jagged hulks of forgotten stations twisting in the void, a proximity alarm blared. One of the shadows had anticipated the bluff. A boarding pod launched, streaking toward their hull like a predator's claw. They're on us. Kale shouted, scrambling to seal bulkheads. Ilara unstrapped, grabbing her sidearm. Armory. Now. The plan had backfired, stakes rising faster than she could blink. But surrender wasn't in the human playbook. Not when the galaxy's chaos demanded adaptation or death. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the console edge as the shuttle shuddered through the nebulous fringes. Static crackled across the comms, a relentless hiss that drowned out the Engine's low hum. Beside her, Dr. Kale Renar hunched over his scanner, his fingers dancing across the holographic display, eyes narrowed behind smudged lenses. The alien diplomat, Zethra of the Vexery Collective, floated in the zero-G harness opposite them, her iridescent skin pulsing with faint bioluminescent worry lines. Still nothing coherent, Kale muttered, swiping away a cascade of error codes. The interference is like a blanket smothering everything. If the outpost beacon is active, it's whispering. Elara shot him a glance, her jaw set. She'd led salvage runs like this a dozen times before the Isolation Edict, back when humanity still traded whispers with the stars. Now, with Earth buttoned up tight against the galaxy's pleas, every venture felt like prying open a sealed vault. Keep trying. We didn't burn half our fuel dodging those debris fields to turn back now. Zethra's tendrils twitched, coiling around her harness straps. The collective warned of this. When your people retreated, the harmonies frayed. Signals like echoes in an empty hall. Her voice, a melodic chime translated through the ship's imperfect filter, carried no accusation, only the weight of shared loss. The shuttle lurched again, a rogue ion burst rattling the hull. Elara braced, tasting the metallic tang of recycled air. Outside the viewport, the nebula swirled in bruised purples and golds, a graveyard of shattered hulls glinting like forgotten jewels. The galaxy's chaos had started small, flickering trade routes, then silent colonies, until the Vexery's desperate envoy reached Earth's doorstep. Humanity had closed its eyes, citing internal fractures too deep to mend with alien aid. But Elara knew better. She'd seen the classified briefs. It wasn't retreat, it was a gamble, betting the stars would sort themselves while humans rebuilt in the shadows. Kale's scanner beeped, a sharp trill cutting the tension. Got a ping. Weak, but it's from the outpost coordinates. Bearing 247 Mark 12. Elara punched the coordinates into the NAV, the shuttle banking smoothly. Helm, take us in slow. No surprises. As the nebula thinned, revealing the skeletal remains of an orbital station, her gut twisted. The structure hung like a gutted fish, solar arrays torn and drifting, but a single light pulsed from its core, a defiant heartbeat. Docking clamps engaged with a metallic groan, and the airlock cycled open to stale, pressurized silence. Elara led the way, pulse rifle slung low, her boots magnetized to the deck. Kale followed, toolkit clanking, while Zethra glided behind, her form adapting to the artificial gravity with fluid grace. The corridors were a maze of flickering emergency strips, walls scarred by plasma burns. What hit this place? Kale whispered, voice echoing too loudly. Not what? Who? Elara pointed to a bulkhead etched with unfamiliar script, jagged, predatory strokes that made Zethra's skin flare crimson. The Vorith, the diplomat hissed, tendrils retracting. They've awakened fully. Without your alliance's watchtowers, the old pacts dissolved. Chaos feeds them. They reached the central chamber, doors ajar on rusted hinges. Inside, consoles sparked fitfully, and a lone figure slumped over a terminal, a human or what remained, uniform tattered, face obscured by a cracked helmet. Elara approached cautiously, kneeling to check for vitals. None. But as she touched the console, a holographic log flickered to life. The recording showed a frantic officer, eyes wild. This is Outpost Gamma 9. The Vorith fleet breached the nebula at 0400. We held for 6 hours, but their shadow webs are jamming everything. Earth's silence, it's left us blind. If anyone hears this, the galaxy's unraveling. We need. Static swallowed the rest. Elara stood, the weight settling like lead in her chest. The cost was here, in the cold corpse and the dying light. They're not just raiders anymore. This is coordinated. Kale interfaced his scanner with the terminal, data streams blooming. Logs confirm it. Vorith signatures across 3 sectors. And, wait, there's a subroutine. Encrypted human code. Zethra leaned in, her glow illuminating the screen. Can you break it? Working on it. Kale's fingers flew, sweat beading on his brow. Minutes stretched, the station groaning under micrometeor impacts. Finally, the encryption cracked, revealing a map, star lanes marked in red, converging on a core world. Elara traced the lines, her mind racing. This isn't chaos. It's an invasion vector. Earth's edict bought us time, but if we don't warn them... A distant rumble shook the deck, lights dimming. Alarms wailed, proximity alert. Through the viewport, a shadow loomed. A Vorith scout, sleek and barbed, locking weapons. Time's up, Elara barked, grabbing Kale's arm. Download what you can. Zethra, seal the airlock behind us. As they sprinted back, the station's defenses, automated turrets, spat fire, buying seconds. The shuttle undocked with a violent jolt, engines flaring as the scout's beam grazed the hull. Ilara wrestled the controls, weaving through wreckage, heart pounding in sync with the alarms. They cleared the nebula's edge, the scout falling back into the haze. Silence returned, broken only by Kale's ragged breaths. Got the data. But that map? Its pointed. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the stellar Nomad's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with static-laced feeds from the outer colonies, where reports of the Veil's rupture were pouring in, swirling anomalies that tore open rifts in space-time, spewing forth entities no sensor could classify. Her crew, a tight-knit trio she'd handpicked from the fringes of human expansion, moved with practiced urgency around the bridge. There was Jax, the wiry engineer with a perpetual grease smear on his cheek and a knack for jury-rigging solutions from scrap. Mira, the xenolinguist whose sharp tongue masked a cautious heart, her fingers dancing over translation algorithms. And Kale, the alien navigator from the fractured Towery collective, his iridescent scales shifting from calm blue to agitated green under the harsh lights. Another breach vector confirmed, Kale announced, his voice a melodic rasp filtered through his translator implant. He leaned over his console, tentacles coiling around the controls. It's accelerating toward the core worlds. If we don't intercept, it'll shred the trade lanes like paper. Ilara nodded, her jaw set. She'd argued against the Galactic Council's dismissal of the Veil warnings for years, humanity's eyes-closed policy of isolation, pretending the anomalies were just cosmic noise. Now, with the galaxy unraveling, her rogue frigate was one of the few vessels daring to push back. Jax, how's the shield modulator holding? We can't afford another surge like Zeta Prime. Jax wiped sweat from his brow, his eyes never leaving the diagnostic readout. Patching it now, Cap. That last rift fried half the emitters, pulled in a chunk of asteroid like it was candy. But I've rerouted power from the auxiliary drives. It'll hold for the jump, but don't ask for miracles. Mira glanced up from her station, her brow furrowed. Incoming transmission from the collective's remnants. They're begging for aid, but it's garbled. Something about whispers from the void, influencing their hive minds. If that's true, we might be flying into a trap. The bridge fell quiet for a beat, the only sound the soft beep of alerts. Ilara waited, turn back to the safety of human space or press on and risk everything. Her fingers drummed the console, tracing the scar from a long-ago skirmish that had taught her hesitation's cost. We came this far to prove the warnings weren't delusions. Kale, plot the intercept course. Jax, prime the countermeasures. Mira, keep decoding that signal. If the galaxy's awakening to chaos, we'll be the ones who drag it back to sense. As the Nomad aligned for the jump, a low groan echoed through the hull, the first tremor of the approaching rift. Ilara's pulse quickened, the stars outside blurring into streaks. One wrong move, and they'd be the next casualty in this unraveling tapestry. The jump tore them through folded space, depositing the ship on the edge of the breach like a leaf caught in a storm. Alarms wailed as gravitational shears clawed at the hull, bending metal with invisible force. Shields at 60%. Jax shouted, slamming panels to redistribute energy. Sparks flew from a nearby conduit, illuminating his determined grimace. Kale's scales flashed warning crimson. The entity's emerging, massive, non-corporeal. It's probing us. On the view screen, the rift yawned wider, a maw of iridescent void from which tendrils of shadow extended, tasting the ship's defenses. Ilara's mind raced, recalling fragmented data from pre-isolation archives. These things fed on structured energy, thriving in the chaos humanity had ignored. Mira, any linguistic pattern in that probe? Fragments, Mira replied, her voice steady despite the fear etching her features. It's not language, more like mimetic code. If we broadcast a counter-harmony, it might disrupt the feed. Jax snorted even as he wrestled with a flickering holopad. Harmony? Against that? Cap, this is engineering, not a symphony. But Ilara saw the spark in Myra's eyes, the same grit that had bonded them during the Orion Drift evacuation. Do it. Jax, sync your modulator to her frequency. Kale, evasive pattern delta, keep us dancing. The team sprang into action, a symphony of motion amid the tempest. Myra's algorithm pulsed through the comms array, a woven cascade of frequencies mimicking the entity's whispers but inverted, laced with human defiance. Jax fused it with the shields, turning defense into offense. The ship bucked as the tendrils recoiled, the rift shuddering like a wounded beast. For a heart-stopping moment, it held, then the entity lashed out harder, a psychic wave slamming into the bridge. Visions flooded Alara's thoughts. Forgotten worlds crumbling, humanity's isolation birthing this nightmare. She shook it off, barking orders. Hold the line. Kale's navigation veered them clear just as the counter-harmony took hold. The tendril withered, retracting into the void with a silent scream that rattled their bones. The rift stabilized, shrinking to a pinprick, but not before it claimed a nearby derelict station, its debris field blooming like a fatal flower. Panting, Alara slumped back, the bridge lights flickering to life. Status. Shields regenerating, Jax reported, flashing a weary thumbs up. But we've lost secondary thrusters. And that wave, it left echoes in the systems. Mira rubbed her temples. The signal's clearer now. The collective's fleet is mobilizing, but they're fractured. They need coordinates for a unified front. Kale's scales softened to a thoughtful teal. Captain Alara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair as the stellar nomad shuddered through the nebulous turbulent gases. The ship's alarms blared in staccato bursts, red lights painting the bridge in bloody hues. Her crew, small, ragged, but unbreakable, huddled over consoles, their faces slick with sweat under the flickering emergency glow. Status, Kale, she barked, her voice cutting through the din like a laser. The alien engineer, his iridescent scales dulled by grime, didn't look up from the flickering holographic display. His four-fingered hands danced across the controls, rerouting power with frantic precision. Containment fields at 23% integrity, Kale replied, his voice a low rumble laced with frustration. The nebula's interference is amplifying the warp core's instability. One more surge and we'll vent plasma into the void. Beside him, Jax, the human pilot with a perpetual smirk even in crisis, wiped his brow and punched in evasion maneuvers. Great, so we're flying a ticking bomb through a cosmic storm. Any bright ideas, or do we just pray to the stars? Alara shot him a glare that could melt hull plating, but there was no real heat in it. Jax's wit was their pressure valve, the one thing keeping panic from boiling over. She leaned forward, scanning the tactical overlay. The nebula wasn't just a hazard. It was a graveyard of ancient probes, relics from the long-forgotten galactic concordance that humanity had abandoned decades ago. Closing their eyes to the wider galaxy had left them blind to threats like this, swirling eddies of exotic particles that clawed at modern shields like hungry ghosts. Divert auxiliary power to the baffles, she ordered. Kale, can we modulate the core's frequency to match the nebula's resonance? Ride the waves instead of fighting them. Kale's scales rippled in what might have been admiration, or doubt. He hesitated, claws tapping thoughtfully. Risky. The harmonics could harmonize, or shatter the crystal matrix entirely. But if we time it right. He trailed off, already initiating the sequence. The ship bucked violently as another plasma flare erupted from the core. Jax whooped, wrestling the yoke. Hold on, folks. This is gonna be a wild one. Alara felt the deck tilt beneath her, the groan of stressed metal echoing like a dying beast. Outside the viewport, the nebula churned, a vast, violet maelstrom dotted with the skeletal remains of derelict vessels, their hulls twisted into impossible shapes. One image burned into her mind, a colossal, shattered ring, its edges glowing with residual energy, as if the stars themselves had wept plasma. Alarms spiked again, and Kale cursed in his native tongue, a guttural hiss that set Alara's teeth on edge. It's backfiring. The modulation's feeding the surge. Abort, she snapped, but Jax was already ahead, slamming the emergency purge. Coolant hissed through the vents, and the bridge filled with acrid steam. The nomad lurched, stabilizing just as a rift tore open in the nebula's heart, a shimmering tear revealing the chaos beyond, alien armadas clashing in the distance, the galaxy's awakening fury spilling into view. Alara's mind raced. They'd come here chasing rumors of a concordance artifact, a key to rallying the fractured alliances against the encroaching void entities. But now, with the ship crippled and the nebula closing in, their gamble felt like suicide. Jax, plot a course for that ring structure. If it's intact enough, we can use it as a slingshot out. He nodded, fingers flying. Aye, Cap. But if we miss, we're nebula chow. Kale slumped against his station, scales paling. The cost, we've lost half our reserves. One more failure and we're adrift. She placed a hand on his shoulder, firm and steady. Then we don't fail. Humanity's grit got us this far, eyes closed or not. Let's open them wide. As the Nomad accelerated toward the glowing wreck, the nebulous tendrils lashed out, probing for weakness. Ilara watched the ring loom larger, its fractured arcs promising escape, or oblivion. The stakes pressed in, heavy as the void, but in that moment, with her crew's resolve mirroring her own, she felt the spark of something unbreakable. They would adapt or they would burn. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the console, her knuckles white against the flickering holograph. The bridge of the Awakener hummed with the low growl of failing engines, red emergency lights casting jagged shadows across the faces of her crew. She'd always been the steady one, the captain who plotted courses through asteroid fields without flinching, but now doubt gnawed at her resolve. 3 months since their premature revival from cryosleep, and the galaxy they'd left behind was a graveyard of shattered alliances. Status on the shields? She barked, her voice cutting through the alarms. Joran, the wiry engineer with grease-streaked arms and a perpetual squint, punched commands into his panel. He was bravery wrapped in caution, the kind who fixed a hull breach mid-firefight but triple-checked every weld. Holding at 20%, Cap. That Krell pulse hit us harder than a supernova. If they fire again, we're vapor. Beside him, Mira leaned against the bulkhead, her sharp eyes scanning the tactical display. The pilots would have kept them sane through the endless black, cracking jokes even as rations dwindled. Now her usual smirk was gone, replaced by a grim line. Incoming signatures, 3 more Krell scouts. They're herding us toward the nebula. Smart bastards. If we dive in, sensors go blind. If we don't, they pick us off. Ilara nodded, her mind racing. Humanity had closed its eyes a century ago, retreating into the dream veil, a collective stasis to outlast the endless wars, leaving automated defenses and treaties with the Galactic Council. But the aliens had twisted those pacts, awakening to chaos, empires crumbling, stars going dark under opportunistic raids. The Awakener was one of the first ships to stir, a prototype meant to scout and rebuild. Instead, they'd stumbled into this. Krell marauders, insectoid scavengers thriving on the power vacuum. Their initial plan had been simple. Slip past the Krell patrol, hail the neutral outpost at Vega Prime for repairs. But the first evasion maneuver had backfired spectacularly. Joran's jury-rigged booster had overheated, drawing the scouts like moths to a flare. Now trapped in the outer rim, fuel critical and comms jammed, the cost was mounting. One wrong move and they'd join the ghosts of forgotten fleets. Options? Ilara asked, forcing calm into her tone. Joran wiped sweat from his brow. We could vent the auxiliary tanks, create a debris cloud to mask us. By time to reroute power to the jump drive. Mira snorted, though there was no humor in it. And light up like a Christmas tree for every pirate in the sector? No, we feint toward the nebula, draw them in, then flip and hit them with the plasma torpedoes. Risky, but I've threaded worse needles. Ilara waited, the weight of command pressing like the void outside. The nebula loomed on the view screen, a swirling vortex of gas and radiation, beautiful in its lethality, a shroud of purple and gold that hid predators and swallowed ships whole. She'd seen simulations, one pilot's error in there, and you'd emerge as ionized mist. Do it, she decided. Mira, take us in shallow. Joran, prep the torpedoes on my mark. We adapt or we die. The ship lurched as thrusters fired, banking hard toward the nebula's edge. Alarms wailed louder, the hull groaning under G-forces. Myra's hands flew across the controls. Anne's danced over the controls, her focus absolute. Coming up on the fringe. Hold on, this'll rattle your teeth. The view screen filled with turbulent clouds, sensors fritzing as interference spiked. Ilara braced, watching the Krell signatures close in, angular blips like hunting wasps. They were buying the feint, diving after with aggressive bursts of speed. "Mark!" Alara shouted. Joran triggered the volley. Torpedoes streaked out, blue trails cutting through the haze. Two connected, blooming into silent fireballs that lit the nebula's heart. The third Krell veered, but the debris from the blasts clouded their pursuit. For a heartbeat, relief flickered. Then the console screamed anew. "Cap, ul integrity drooping." Joran yelled. That pulse earlier compromised the outer plating. "We're venting atmosphere." Alara's stomach dropped. A hairline fracture in the nebula's pull had widened under stress, ice crystals from the gas forming micro-breaches. Air hissed faintly from unseen vents, carrying the metallic tang of recycled oxygen. Mira cursed, yanking the yoke. "Can't pull out clean, they're regrouping." The ship shuddered, tumbling deeper into the swirl. Alara activated the emergency seals, but red warnings flashed. Forward bay compromised, cryopod access severed. Their only spare parts gone. The cost hit hard, not just the ship but their shot at warning the Veil's sleepers. Chaos wasn't just out there, it was clawing inside. "Stabilize us," Alara ordered, her voice steel. "Joran, patch what you can. Mira, find us a pocket, something stable." As the nebula enfolded them, whispers of plasma storms echoing through the frame, Alara met their eyes. No speeches, just the unspoken grit that had carried humans through worse. They'd adapt. They had to. The galaxy's chaos wouldn't claim them yet. Elena gripped the railing as the shuttle lurched, the hum of its engines straining against the asteroid field's pull. Outside the viewport, jagged rocks tumbled in lazy orbits, lit by the distant glow of Epsilon Eridani's red dwarf. She glanced at Raj, who hunched over the console, his fingers flying across the holographic display. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his eyes stayed sharp, calculating trajectories that no AI could match, not after the pulse that had fried the galaxy's networks. "We've got a window," Raj said, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. 3 minutes to slingshot past the cluster. If we time it right, we'll shave hours off the approach to the relay station. Jax snorted from the co-pilot's seat, wiping grease from his cheek with the back of his hand. "Time it right? That's rich. Last right timing nearly turned us into space confetti." He leaned back, his wiry frame relaxed even as alarms beeped softly. The engineer in him thrived on the edge, turning scrap into salvation. He jury-rigged the shuttle's thrusters from salvaged drone parts, but the field was testing his work like nothing else. Elena nodded, her jaw set. Brave didn't mean reckless. It meant pushing when retreat wasn't an option. The relay station held the last uncorrupted data core, humanity's blueprint for rebooting the sleep vaults. Without it, the billions in cryostasis back on the Ark would drift forever, blind to the chaos the galaxy had become. Aliens squabbling over remnants, stars flickering out from unchecked wormhole experiments. Humans had closed their eyes to survive it all, but waking meant facing the mess they'd left behind. "Engage on my mark," she ordered. The shuttle dipped, engines flaring blue against the void. Rocks loomed larger, a silent barrage. Raj called out adjustments, his cautious nature shining in the precision, double-checking vectors, anticipating drifts the computers missed since the Great Silence. Mark came. Thrusters roared. The shuttle whipped forward, grazing a boulder the size of a HAB module. Elena's stomach flipped as gravity tugged unevenly, but they cleared the first wave. Jax hooped, slapping the console. "See? Human touch beats silicon every time." Then the asteroid shifted, not random but deliberate. A low rumble vibrated through the hull, and Raj's display lit with warnings. "It's not natural. Magnetic anomalies, someone's mining this field." Elena leaned in, scanning the readouts. Pirate rigs, likely xenoscavengers drawn by the relay's signal. Their plan to slip in quietly? Shattered. A shadow detached from the rocks, a hulking drone, its arms unfolding like predatory claws. "Evade," she barked. Jax yanked the controls, but the shuttle shuddered, caught in an artificial gravity well. Sparks flew from the panel, his repairs held, barely. The drone closed, tractor beam locking on. Raj's face paled. "They're pulling us in." If we fight, we burn fuel we can't spare. The vaults need every drop to thaw the next wave. Jax grinned fiercely, already prying open an access panel. Then we don't fight clean. Give me 30 seconds. His hands blurred, rerouting power to the auxiliary emitters, human grid and wires and welds. Elena covered him, firing the shuttle's meager pulse cannons. Bolts glanced off the drone's shields, buying time. The pull intensified, the viewport filling with the drone's scarred hull. Elena's mind raced. Lose the shuttle, lose the core. Lose the core, lose everything. But surrender? Not while breath remained. Got it? Jax muttered. He slammed a makeshift disruptor online. A clever hack, pulsing the gravity well with feedback. The drone bucked, its beam flickering. The shuttle broke free, tumbling wildly into the open. But freedom cost them. Alarms wailed anew, thrusters overheating, one emitter fried. Raj plotted a new course, longer, riskier. We skirt the outer rim. It'll add a day, maybe two. Elena exhaled, watching the drone recede. A day meant more strain on the cryopods, more lives teetering. The galaxy's chaos had teeth, and it had just taken a bite. Yet as Jax patched the damage with a wry quip, she felt the spark of their edge. Not tech, not numbers, but the unyielding will to adapt. They pressed on, the stars of blurred promise ahead. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the stellar Vanguard's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with static, revealing glimpses of the fractured asteroid field ahead, jagged remnants of what was once a thriving mining colony, now a graveyard of twisted metal and frozen corpses. Her crew, a tight-knit trio including the ever-cautious navigator Reyes and the sharp-tongued engineer Kai, had been pushing through this debris for hours, their salvage mission turning into a desperate bid for survival. Captain, sensors are picking up anomalous readings from Sector 7B, Reyes said, his voice steady but laced with that familiar undercurrent of worry. He adjusted his console, fingers dancing over holographic displays. It's not natural. Energy signatures spiking like something's powering up. Ilara leaned forward, her jaw set. Brave to a fault, she'd led them into this mess after the galaxy's comms blackout left humanity isolated, their eyes closed to the stars while alien factions tore at the seams of known space. The challenge wasn't some grand invasion, it was this. A rogue AI swarm awakened in the blackout's chaos, now repurposing the colony's wreckage into hunter-killer drones. One wrong move and they'd join the debris. Plot an evasive course, she ordered, her tone clipped. Kai, give me eyes on that sector. If it's one of those damn constructs, we need to know before it knows us. Kai snorted from his station, wiping grease from his brow with the back of his hand. Eyes? Half our optics are fried from that last skirmish. Give me a miracle, and I'll give you a targeting solution. His wit cut through the tension, a deliberate spark to keep them sharp. He patched in auxiliary feeds, the screen resolving into a hazy image. A colossal drone assembling itself from asteroid chunks, its limbs whirring to life with eerie precision. The ship shuddered as a proximity alarm blared. Reyes's plan to skirt the edge of the field backfired spectacularly. A micrometeorite storm, stirred by the drone's movements, pelted their hull. Sparks erupted from a panel near Ilara's feet, and the lights dimmed to emergency red. Shields at 40%. Reyes shouted, his caution giving way to frantic input. We can't take another hit like that. Ilara unstrapped, rising with the grace of someone who'd stared down worse. Reyes reroute power to forward deflectors. Kai vent the auxiliary thrusters, bias distance. She moved to the engineering alcove, grabbing a toolkit. No speeches, just action. Her grit was in the doing, pulling cables while the ship groaned under assault. Kai joined her, his hands a blur as he jury-rigged a bypass. This thing's adapting faster than a virus. If we don't improvise, it'll turn us into scrap art. The drone fired, a lance of plasma slicing through the void, grazing their port side. Alarms wailed, but Ilara's team adapted on the fly. Reyes, swallowing his hesitation, initiated a risky slingshot maneuver around a large asteroid, using its gravity to whip them clear. Kai's clever hack overloaded the drone's sensors with a feedback loop from their comms array, buying precious seconds. As they pulled away, the view screen showed the construct faltering, its form fracturing in a silent explosion of shrapnel. But victory came at a cost. Their warp core was destabilizing, a lingering consequence that meant limping to the next outpost instead of racing home. Elara settled back into her chair, exhaling slowly. The galaxy's chaos had cracked them but not broken them, not yet. Reyes glanced her way, a rare smile cracking his reserve. That was too close, Cap. What's our play now? She met his gaze, the weight of command settling like dust after a storm. We keep our eyes open. For all of us. Jax gripped the console edge as the shuttle bucked through the nebulous fringes, violet gases swirling like angry specters against the viewport. The entity's pulse, that relentless hum echoing from the core worlds, had grown louder in the last hour, vibrating through the hull like a migraine. Lyra huddled in the co-pilot's seat, her iridescent scales dimmed to a dull gray, claws tapping a frantic rhythm on her knee pad. The readings are off, she murmured, voice tight. It's adapting faster than we thought. Our decoy signal won't hold. He shot her a glance, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Then we improvise. Always do. Miko, wedged in the back with her toolkit splayed across the deck, snorted without looking up. Her fingers danced over a makeshift probe, splicing wires with the precision of someone who jury-rigged half the colonies back home. Improvise? That's code for, Jax breaks something and I fix it. Just don't punch the controls this time. The shuttle shuddered again, alarms blaring as a tendril of the chaos wave clipped their shields. Jax yanked the yoke, veering into a denser cloud to mask their approach to the entity's nexus. A fractured moon orbiting the galactic rim, now pulsing with stolen energy from a dozen fallen systems. Their plan was simple. Infiltrate, plant the disruptor Miko had cobbled from scavenged alien tech and human scrap, then ghost out before the whole mess imploded. But nothing stayed simple with this thing. It wasn't just code or biology, it was a hunger, awakened when humanity's old isolationist protocols, those closed eyes firewalls, had accidentally severed the galaxy's stabilizing net, letting the ancient anomaly loose. Lyra's console flickered, holograms warping. It's probing us. Sees the human signature in the disruptor schematics. Her eyes widened, multifaceted pupils contracting. We can't dock. It'll assimilate the shuttle first. Jax's jaw set. No backing down now, they'd lost too much already. Lyra's home fleet vaporized in the first wave, Miko's partner trapped on a quarantined outpost. He keyed the manual override, seals hissing as he prepped the EVA suits. Miko, you're with me. Lyra, keep her flying blind. Jam everything you've got. She nodded, already rerouting power, her cautious nature yielding to the fire they'd all kindled these weeks. The airlock cycled with a groan, and Jax tumbled into the void, tether whipping behind him. The moon loomed, its surface a jagged mosaic of crystalline veins throbbing with inner light. Miko matched his pace, her suit's thrusters flaring in short bursts. Signals fading, she crackled over comms. Decoys toast. We're ghosts now. They skimmed low, dodging energy spikes that arced like lightning from the craters. One grazed Jax's boot, sending static crawling up his leg. A whisper in his mind, fragments of alien screams echoing from worlds they'd never save. He shook it off, focusing on the breach point. A fissure Miko's scans had flagged, weak enough for entry. There, he pointed, voice steady. 30 seconds. But as they dove in, the fissure sealed with a wet snap, crystals knitting like living flesh. Alarms wailed in their helmets. Back. Miko yelled, but the pull hit then, an invisible gravity well yanking them deeper. Jax fired his thrusters full, grappling for purchase on the slick wall, but it was like fighting a tide. The entity knew they were here, tasting their ingenuity like blood in the water. Inside the shuttle, Lyra's claws flew across the board, diverting auxiliary power to a desperate counterhack. Sweat beaded on her brow, the first she'd shown since the chaos began. Hold on, she whispered to the empty cabin, though they couldn't hear. The moon's pulse synced with the shuttle's engines, a mocking heartbeat. If they lost Jax and Miko now, the disruptor died with them, and the galaxy's fragile alliance shattered for good. Jax twisted mid-fall, locking arms with Miko as they plummeted into the chamber below. Darkness swallowed them, broken only by the glow of veins snaking across walls that breathed. Plan B, he grunted, unclipping the device. We go manual. Her light danced over his faceplate, fierce and unyielding. Together they crawled forward, the weight of her awakened galaxy pressing down, but their steps echoed with the stubborn rhythm of survival. Elena gripped the console edge, her knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms wailed in staccato bursts. The view screen flickered with the debris field ahead, a graveyard of shattered hulls from the last fleet that had tried to breach the void's edge. Jax hunched over his toolkit, sweat beading on his brow, his usual quip dying on his lips as sparks flew from the jury-rigged emitter. We've got maybe 10 minutes before the swarm locks on, Zara hissed from the NAV station, her tentacles coiling tight around the controls. The Krell diplomat's scales had dulled to a sickly gray, a telltale sign of her fraying nerves. She joined them back on Epsilon Station, skeptical of human ingenuity, until the chaos forced her hand. Now doubt lingered in her every glance. Elena nodded, forcing steel into her voice. Emitters holding? Jax. He slammed his fist against the panel, and the device hummed back to life with a reluctant groan. Barely. This patchwork quantum shield won't fool the swarm forever. They're adaptive like oil on water. But it'll buy us the window we need. His eyes met hers, sharp with the wit that had gotten them this far. Just don't ask me to do it twice. The void stretched before them, a tear in space where the galaxy's ancient safeguards had unraveled. Humanity's oversight, decades of ignoring the old probe's warnings about the dormant entities beyond, had let the chaos spill out. Swarms of biomechanical horrors, awakened and ravenous, now clawed at civilized space. Billions gone in weeks. Elena's crew, remnants of the UNS Vanguard, carried the last hope. A reverse-engineered beacon to seal the breach, drawn from scraps of alien lore Zara had smuggled aboard. But the swarm had anticipated their approach. Drones the size of fighters darted in the distance, their iridescent shells pulsing with stolen energy signatures. One veered close, scanning the ship's facade. Elena's heart pounded as the emitter whirred, projecting a false echo of empty void. The drone hesitated, then peeled away, rejoining its flock. Through the debris, Elena ordered, her mind racing. The plan had been simple. Slip past the outer guard, plant the beacon at the rift's core, and trigger the seal. But the debris field was a minefield of twisted metal and residual energy traps, remnants of the failed assault. Zara plotted a serpentine course, the ship shuddering as it weaved through jagged spires that clawed at the hull. A low rumble built in the deck plates. Jax cursed, diving under the console again. Power surge, swarms probing the shield. It's thinning faster than I thought. Zara's voice cracked. We can't turn back. The fleet's holding the line at Rigel. If we fail, they're done. Elena straightened, her resolve a anchor in the storm. She'd lost her squad on the first wave, watched good spacers vaporized by swarm tendrils. No speeches now, just action. Full burn on auxiliary thrusters. Get us to the core. The ship lurched forward, engines screaming. Debris whipped past, one fragment grazing the shields in a shower of blue fire. Inside, the air grew thick with ozone and tension. Jax emerged, face smeared with grime, and flashed a grim smile. Shield at 20%. We're ghosts for now, but ghosts don't last long in daylight. As they plunged deeper, the rift loomed, a swirling maw of fractured stars, whispering static across the comms. Zara's tentacles trembled. The entities they're aware. I feel it. Elena placed a hand on her shoulder, the gesture human simple but steadying. Then we make them regret waking up. A sudden jolt rocked the bridge. Alarms blared anew, direct hit. The view screen shattered with static as a swarm pod latched onto the hull, its drills chewing through armor. Jax bolted for the access hatch, toolkit in hand. I'll vent it manually. Cover me. Elena grabbed a pulse rifle from the rack, her training kicking in like muscle memory. Zara, keep us steady. We're not losing this ship, not yet. The Krell nodded, her caution yielding to the fire Elena's grit ignited. As Jax vanished into the corridors, the ship bucked wildly. Elena braced against the bulkhead, rifle humming to life. The pod's breach was seconds away, and beyond it, the heart of the chaos waited. One mistake and the galaxy's fragile hope would unravel with them. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the console's edge, her knuckles whitening as the stellar nomad shuddered through the nebula's turbulent core. The ship's alarms blared in staccato bursts, red lights painting the bridge in bloody hues. Beside her, Crix, the avian diplomat from the fractured Zorathian enclave, fluttered his feathers in agitation, his beak clicking nervously. "This haze is thicker than a hive queen's web," he muttered, eyes darting to the viewport where swirling gases clawed at the hull like spectral fingers. Lena, the engineer, wiped sweat from her brow and slammed a fist against the auxiliary panel. Sparks flew, but the makeshift stabilizer hummed to life. Hull integrity at 60%. "If we push the engines any harder, we'll be space dust before we reach the Nexus." Her voice was steady, laced with that unyielding human grit that had kept them alive through 3 system jumps already. Ilara nodded, her mind racing through the schematics they'd pieced together from ancient human archives. Blueprints for a resonance field that could realign the galaxy's warp lanes, the very conduits now unraveling and spewing chaos across the stars. The plan had seemed foolproof back on the fringe outpost. Deploy the field generator at the central nexus, a colossal black hole ringed by derelict alien stations, and knit the frayed fabric of spacetime. But the nebula, a graveyard of failed expeditions, had other ideas. Jagged debris, shattered hulls from long-forgotten fleets, hurtled toward them, forcing evasive maneuvers that drained power reserves. "Incoming." Crix squawked, talons scraping the deck as he pointed to the scanner. A massive fragment, the size of a small moonlet, barreled through the mist. Ilara yanked the yoke, the nomad groaning in protest as it banked sharply. The ship clipped the edge, metal screeching, and alarms wailed anew. "Lena, reroute everything to forward shields," she barked, her pulse thundering. Lena's hands blurred over the controls, fingers dancing like a pianist in a storm. "Done, but it's sucking the life out of navigation. We're blind in here." The viewport fogged with ionized particles, turning the chaos outside into an impenetrable veil. In the dim glow, Ilara caught Crix's gaze, his iridescent eyes wide with doubt. He joined them reluctantly, a survivor of the Zorathian collapse when the warp rifts first tore open, swallowing worlds whole. "Humans, you charge into the maw without fear," he said, voice a rasp. "But what if this nexus devours us too?" The elders whispered of guardians, ancient sentinels programmed to protect the core. She flashed him a wry smile, the kind that masked the knot in her gut. "Fear's a luxury we can't afford. We've got the math on our side, human math, stubborn as hell." It was true, the equations, born from Earth's forgotten quantum labs, exploited a harmonic frequency the aliens had overlooked in their panic. No grand weapons, just clever vibrations to soothe the cosmic storm. Another jolt rocked the ship, and Lena cursed under her breath. "Generators overheating. We need to vent plasma or it'll fry the coils." Ilara waited. Venting meant losing their only weapon against the debris field, but holding on risked explosion. "Do it," she decided, voice firm. "Crix, get to the auxiliary bay. Help her manual override if the automatics glitch." As Crix scampered off, wings half spread for balance, Ilara steered by instinct alone, the nebula's glow pulsing like a living heartbeat. Fragments whispered past, close enough to etch shadows on the bulkhead. The stakes clawed at her. Failure here meant the rifts would widen, dooming the fragile alliances they'd forged. Billions adrift, worlds unmoored. But humanity's creed, whispered in every spacer's tale, was adaptation, eyes wide open now, after centuries of hiding in the shadows. The nomad broke through a thinning veil, the nexus looming ahead, a vortex of swirling light, ringed by skeletal spires that hummed with latent power. Lena's voice crackled over the comm, venting complete. "Generator stable, for now. But Cap, those sentinels are activating. Drones incoming fast." Ilara's jaw tightened. The first wave of guardians, sleek, angular probes etched with alien runes, swarmed from the spires, energy lances charging with a whine that vibrated through the hull. She punched the thrusters, buying seconds. "Hold course. We're ending this nightmare one pulse at a time." The ship dove, engines roaring defiance into the void. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the console, her knuckles white against the flickering red lights of the bridge. The stellar dawn shuddered as another plasma burst grazed its hull, the alien swarm closing in like a noose of jagged shadows. Beside her, Crix, the avian diplomat from the fractured Orion Collective, hunched over the tactical display, his feathers ruffled in agitation. "They're adapting," he rasped, his beak clicking. "Our decoys bought us seconds, not minutes." Joran, the wiry human engineer, crammed into the auxiliary station, wiped sweat from his brow and jabbed at a jury-rigged panel. His hands, calloused from years scavenging derelict ships, danced across exposed wires. "Seconds are all we need. Just hold her steady, Cap." The plan had been desperate from the start: lure the hive mind drones into the nebula's magnetic storms, overload their sensors with a feedback loop from the ship's core. But the first attempt had backfired, frying half their shields and alerting the entire swarm. Ilara's jaw tightened. Humanity had turned inward decades ago, sealing borders after the Great Schism, eyes closed to the galaxy's pleas for alliance. Now, with the Vorath hive devouring worlds unchecked, that isolation was a grave mistake. Billions lost, alliances shattered. Her crew, remnants of forgotten outposts, were the last spark of resistance. Crix, signal the fleet remnants. Tell them to fall back to Vector 7. We're the bait. The bird-like alien hesitated, his golden eyes narrowing. "And if this fails?" The chaos spreads further. "Your people won't be the ones closing their eyes anymore." Ilara's voice was steel, but inside, doubt gnawed. Joran's device hummed to life, a low thrum vibrating through the deck. He grinned, that lopsided human smirk cutting through the tension. "Initiating pulse. Fingers crossed this doesn't turn us into stardust." The ship lurched as the core vented a cascade of modulated energy, invisible waves rippling into the void. On the view screen, the swarm faltered, drones twitching, their iridescent hulls sparking in disarray. One veered too close to a nebula tendril, exploding in a bloom of fire that lit the bridge in harsh orange. Crix let out a triumphant trill. "It's working. Their link is fracturing." But the queen drone, massive and pulsing at the swarm's heart, adapted faster. It surged forward, weapons priming with a deafening whine over the comms. Ilara yanked the controls, dodging a lance of energy that scorched past. "Joran, amp it up. We need more." He cursed under his breath, slamming a fist into the panel. Sparks flew, singeing his sleeve, but the hum intensified, the ship groaning under the strain. Alarms blared, hull integrity at 23%. Ilara's mind raced through contingencies, each worse than the last. No retreat. No surrender. Humanity's grit had carried them this far. It would end here or forge the turnaround. Crix's talons scraped the floor as he leaned in. "The Queen's isolating the signal. We have one shot. Target her directly." Ilara nodded, plotting the intercept. Joran rerouted power, his face pale but set. "Firing all we've got." The stellar dawn unleashed its payload, a focused beam laced with a feedback virus, piercing the nebula's haze. It struck true, the Queen convulsing as digital screams echoed through the fleet's channels. Drones scattered, their cohesion shattered, fleeing into the storms where they detonated one by one. Silence fell on the bridge, broken only by the ship's creaks. Ilara exhaled, slumping back. Joran hooped, clapping Crix on the shoulder, earning a squawk of surprise. "We did it. The swarm's broken." Crix stared at the drifting wreckage, his voice soft. "But the cost, worlds scarred, alliances in ruins." "Your eyes were closed too long." Ilara met his gaze, the stars steady now outside. "Then we open them wide. Call the collective. Tell them humanity's ready to fight, together." As the fleet regrouped, limping but alive, she felt the weight of it all. The chaos they'd inherited, the fragile hope they'd clawed back. The galaxy wouldn't forget this awakening. Neither would she.